There is a number that quietly follows you. You see it when you stop for fuel. You see it when groceries get more expensive. You see it when your rent rises, when flights cost more, when everything feels heavier. It doesn't come with a warning. It doesn't come with a vote, but it moves your life anyway. Oil, not the barrel, not the markets, the price. Because oil prices don't just sit in energy charts. They move through everything. And when they rise, they don't just reflect the world. They reshape it. We are told a simple story, that oil prices rise because supply falls, that markets respond to scarcity, that what you pay is simply the result of forces too big to control. It sounds fair, neutral, unavoidable, but reality is quieter and more deliberate. Because not long ago, the world wasn't short on oil. In 2025, global production remained strong. Supply chains had stabilized after years of disruption. Inventories were building. Demand growth was slowing. In major economies, prices reflected that. Oil traded closer to the $55 to $65 per barrel range. At various points, levels far below crisis highs. There was no emergency, no sudden shortage, no collapse in supply. And yet, within months, the narrative changed. By early 2026, oil surged past $100 per barrel, with spikes reaching well above that threshold in volatile periods. From stability to shock, from surplus to scarcity, almost overnight. But oil does not move like that on its own. It is moved. There is a narrow passage of water in the Middle East. It doesn't look like much on a map, but it carries something enormous. Roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply flows through it every day. The Strait of Hormuz, a choke point, a pressure valve, a single point of failure for a global system. When tensions rise there, markets don't wait. They react instantly. Even the possibility of disruption is enough. Ships slow, insurance costs rise, supply becomes uncertain, and uncertainty is expensive because markets don't price reality. They price risk. In 2026, geopolitical tensions in the region escalated. Conflicts intensified. Shipping routes were threatened. Energy infrastructure faced risks. It didn't require a complete shutdown. It didn't require total collapse. It only required doubt. And doubt spreads faster than oil. But this is where the story becomes uncomfortable. Because oil markets are not passive. They don't just respond, they amplify. Groups like OPEC+, a coalition of major oil-producing nations, do not simply produce oil. They manage supply, they coordinate output, they influence the balance between scarcity and abundance. And that balance determines price. When prices fall too low, production can be reduced. When prices rise too fast, supply can be cautiously increased, but never too much. Because too much supply kills margins, and too little supply creates panic. Between those two extremes lies profit. This is not hidden, it is understood. Oil is one of the few markets where supply is not purely reactive. It is strategic, because oil is not just a commodity, it is leverage. When oil prices rise, something happens that most people never see. Money moves. Not gradually, not randomly, systematically. Every increase at the pump is not just a number, it is a transfer. From consumers to producers. From households to energy companies. From everyday spending to global balance sheets. Because oil is everywhere. It powers transport, it fuels manufacturing, it underpins logistics, it shapes agriculture. When oil becomes more expensive, everything becomes more expensive. Not all at once, but inevitably. A truck delivering food pays more for fuel. That cost is passed to supermarkets. Supermarkets raise prices. Consumers pay more. The chain continues. Airlines increase fares. Shipping costs rise. Businesses adjust pricing. Inflation spreads. In 2026, central banks began to acknowledge what was happening. Energy costs were feeding directly into inflation forecasts. Even small increases in oil prices can ripple through economies, adding measurable pressure. Estimates suggested that energy shocks alone could contribute around 0.5 percentage point or more to inflation. In a fragile economic environment, that is not small. It is decisive. But inflation is only part of the story. Because when prices rise, central banks respond. Interest rates may increase, borrowing becomes expensive, investment slows, growth weakens. Oil doesn't just raise prices, it tightens the entire system. And yet, while consumers feel pressure, another side of the equation benefits. Oil producers, energy companies, exporting nations. Because when prices rise faster than costs, margins expand, revenue increases, profit follows. This creates a strange and uncomfortable dynamic. The same event that creates hardship for millions can create opportunity for a few, not because of manipulation, but because of structure. The oil industry is built on fixed infrastructure: wells, pipelines, refineries. Once operational, these systems continue producing. Costs remain relatively stable in the short term, but prices are volatile. So when prices surge, revenue rises immediately. Costs do not. That difference becomes profit. And when markets expect further disruption, prices can rise even more. Speculation enters. Traders position themselves. Financial markets amplify physical shortages. What begins as a supply concern becomes a pricing wave. There is another pattern you've probably noticed. When oil prices rise, they rise quickly. But when conditions improve, they fall slowly. This is often described as the rocket and feather effect. Prices shoot up like rockets. They drift down like feathers, because businesses adjust to higher costs immediately, but delay passing on savings. Margins expand quietly on the way down. This isn't unique to oil, but oil magnifies it. Because oil sits at the base of the economic pyramid, everything builds on top of it. We often hear that the world is transitioning away from oil, that renewable energy will reduce dependence, that electric vehicles will change the equation. And over time, they will. But not yet. Oil still dominates critical sectors. Global shipping relies on it. Aviation depends on it. Heavy industry requires it. Agriculture uses it, directly and indirectly. Even renewable infrastructure requires oil in its production and transport. Demand has not disappeared, it has stabilized. And that means oil still controls the system. Which brings us to the most uncomfortable part of the story. Oil prices are not broken. They are functioning, exactly as designed. A system where supply can be influenced. Prices react instantly to risk. Consumers absorb costs automatically. Producers capture gains efficiently. No single actor controls everything. But the structure itself creates outcomes. Governments play a role too. Fuel taxes add layers to pricing. Exchange rates influence import costs. Policies shape supply chains. But even governments are often reactive, because oil markets move globally. And no single country controls them. For countries like Australia, the impact can feel even stronger. Oil is priced in US dollars. When local currency weakens, fuel becomes more expensive, even if global prices remain stable. Add in transportation costs, refining limitations, and retail margins, and the final price at the pump reflects far more than crude oil alone. But the consumer doesn't see that complexity. They see the number, and they feel the impact. This is why oil behaves like a hidden tax. It affects everyone. But no one votes on it. No one debates it directly. No one approves it. And yet it shapes everyday life. Higher fuel costs reduce disposable income. Households cut spending. Businesses adjust hiring. Economic activity slows. The impact spreads quietly. And when oil prices remain high for long enough, the consequences compound. Inflation persists. Interest rates remain elevated. Growth weakens. Recession risks increase. All from one variable: oil. But perhaps the most important thing to understand is that volatility itself is valuable. Oil does not need to stay high forever. It only needs to move, because movement creates opportunity. For traders, for producers, for governments, for investors. Each spike, each drop, each shift creates winners and losers. And the system is built to absorb that, to function within it, to profit from it. Consumers, however, do not operate on volatility. They operate on stability. Budgets, expenses, planning. When prices swing unpredictably, uncertainty grows, and uncertainty carries a cost. That cost is not always visible. It appears in delayed decisions, reduced spending, lower confidence, economic hesitation. Oil doesn't just move markets, it shapes behavior. So when you see fuel prices rise, it's not just a number, it's a signal of tension, of control, of movement within a system larger than any single transaction. Because behind every liter of fuel, there is a chain, from extraction to transport, to refinement, to distribution, to pricing. And within that chain, there are decisions about how much to produce, when to produce it, where to send it, how to price it. Some of those decisions are economic, some are political, some are strategic, but all of them affect you. You don't see the oil fields, you don't see the shipping routes, you don't see the negotiations, you see the result. At the pump, at the store, in your bank account. And the result is simple. When oil rises, you pay more. Not because the system failed, but because the system worked. Oil doesn't just power engines, it powers economies. It powers decisions, it powers profit. And every time the price rises, it reminds you of something quiet, but undeniable. You don't control the system, you live inside it.